Erik, welcome to the Happy Engineer podcast, man. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I know we've been talking about doing something for a few months. Glad we
I
can
know,
finally connect.
way too long. I've been busy. I've been traveling, and we couldn't get this as soon as I would have loved. But now is better than never. I'm so
That's
glad
right.
we can have the time. I'll tell you the same thing I said from the first moment we connected. It was your tagline on LinkedIn that gave me an immediate yes. Erik's coming on the podcast. So right there on the cover photo and in your title, you've taken on the identity and made the bold claim of being the world's happiest software engineer. And I
Right.
love that. I mean, this is the Happy Engineer podcast. You can't have the Happy Engineer podcast without bringing on the world's happiest software engineer. So, what I thought we'd explore first, that I'm honestly just pure curiosity from myself, Erik, would you take me back to the very first moment that you penned those words and said, you know what, this is something I want to put out there in front of the world. I'm the world's happiest software engineer. Like, when was that? Where were you the first time that idea became reality for you?
So I will say, taking a look back, this was about 3 years ago. I was walking out of a therapy session and I was thinking, what do I want to be? I was in a place in my career. I was hyper stressed all the time, to the point where I was yelling at my kids a lot at home. My relationship with my spouse was not great. I was having panic attacks at work where I couldn't breathe. I even went
Wow.
to the ER once because I was having internal bleeding, and the diagnosis was too much stress. Right?
Wow.
Nothing else going on. And I struggled because I know a lot of this was coming from my work, but I also loved my work. I think
Mm.
most developers get into the profession because it's like playing with Legos all day, right? You're putting pieces together, you're playing with toys. Um, so I wanted to keep doing that, but I wanted to be a happier engineer. Having set my own personal weight loss or exercise goals, I know an important component to any goal's success is public accountability.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I remember sitting at my desk and like, how do I make being happy? How do I set that as a goal? How do I get that accountability? So I figured that the first step was to make the bold claim, I'm the world's happiest engineer. So I said that, and I say that now to indicate more of a journey than
Yes.
really a destination, to force me to put positive energy out there, hold me accountable, but also to attract that positive
Mm-hmm.
energy. And
Mm-hmm.
this conversation is one of those, one of the karma aspects
Exactly.
that's kind of played
A
out.
great point of attraction. So
Mm-hmm.
you're coming out of a therapy session, and I mean, is this just percolating in your mind? Like, who do I want to be? I like it. Actually, you said, what do I want to be? A
Mm-hmm.
really cool question. Did it just come in like that? Like, you know what? I want to be the world's happiest software engineer. And that night you were on LinkedIn making
Yeah.
the shift, or was, kind of take us through like what actually happened for you in getting to that specific answer.
The first goal that came out of that therapy session was, I want to be a better father and I want to be a better husband.
Okay.
And then you start asking, right, the five whys, you start digging deeper, right? Well, or how can I do that? Well, really, it's, I need to be happier, right? I need to find more fulfillment. Okay, well, what makes me happy? Well, I enjoy being an engineer, but what are the aspects that I don't enjoy? So then ultimately, I realized it has to be a professional development thing, that my corporate persona is so tightly coupled to my personal life that I can't treat these as separate dimensions anymore. I need to find a way that they can merge. So the follow up was, okay, I'm the world's happiest engineer. And then identifying, what does that role look like for me?
Okay. Okay.
And then identifying 5, 10 different aspects of my profession that I enjoy and that I don't enjoy, ranking them, going through that prioritization process. and then start looking for a new job that
Wow. Okay.
aligns with that energy.
There's so many things I want to come back to on this, but first, something that stood out, and I know many of the engineering leaders that I've coached can relate to this. You described the declaration or the decision to take on this identity, create public accountability. Leading up to that, you were under this immense amount of stress, much of which you would say directly contributed from the work that you did as a developer, the culture, the pressure, the deadlines, the hard work, the people, all of those things. And yet you loved your job, you loved your work. And this tension between work is the source of my greatest pain and it's this source of something that I am passionate about and love, and it's like playing with Legos and it's a dream come true. That is really hard for a lot of leaders, whether you're in technology or hardware or mechanical engineering or civil. It's like you got into it because there's a part of you that is a problem solver who loves engineering. We have the knack, like Dilbert jokes about, But then we go into the company and the environment to do the job, and it is this immensely challenging, very stressful environment. So how do you reconcile those two?
Yeah. So in my process of trying to identify how I could find that happiness, I mentioned part of it's a new role, but I realized that no matter where I go, I can never escape me, right? I'm going to take whatever bad habits I have in my current role, and I'm going to take it with me. So there's no guarantee that even if the environment is better, that I will be better. So I'll give you an example. And this is what I was talking to my therapist about, my own self-defeating thoughts and behaviors. Some of them, including being a people pleaser, right? I want to always say yes. And that would mean I say yes to more work, even though the timelines are tight on the existing work. I say yes or take on an accountability that's really in somebody else's domain. I also had a hero complex.
Okay.
So I want to go in and save all the teams that are failing. I want to save them. I'm intentionally putting myself in really stressful situations. And then the last thing that put me in a bad place was I was tired of corporate drama and politics. There was always finger pointing and blame. So I would just declare, hey, it's my fault. Everybody blame me. Now let's just solve it, right? I got tired of the back and forth. I got tired of the, how am I going to craft this narrative so that it keeps my team safe? No, I will absorb it so we can get through that process, and we're just going to go. Those three things combined just destroyed my mental health.
Yes.
Right?
Wow.
So part of it was identifying roles that would give me more energy, but part of it was, so for me, tactically, I'm, an engineer. I need something like tangible, right?
Yeah.
I went through with my therapist, I created a list of 10 or 20 different faulty beliefs and behaviors. And just like we have at work, where we have a regular retrospective at the end of a sprint, I do a retrospective on those 10 or 20 behaviors and the counter behaviors that I want to exhibit.
Okay.
And I grade myself on it. And that's how in my new role, I've been able to keep myself at bay, my own bad tendencies from taking over and putting me in a bad place.
So you've made the public declaration. There's new level of accountability there that I've told everyone this is true, even though my experience today is that it's not true. Were there any times where you said, this isn't me. Like, I need to take this down. This isn't working. I shouldn't have done this. Maybe some negative self-talk or a downward spiral, like, oh, yeah, I made this big, bold claim and I'm still stressed. I'm still unhappy. I'm still not the dad I want to be. What was that like? Did you have moments where you thought, maybe I shouldn't have done that?
Engaging on social media has been incredibly difficult with that persona. Depending on your platform, the audience can be very demeaning and very aggressive. So I've had to withdraw from being really active, for example, on Twitter or Reddit. They tend to not be as supportive as something like LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn people are more professional in their approach, even if they disagree. Everybody wants to look good on LinkedIn, so they'll
Sure.
respond in a professional manner. So I have had to address the social media that I consume and where I
Mm-hmm.
participate
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that while I want to be challenged, I want to be held accountable. I also want to make sure it's done in a way that doesn't just destroy my self-confidence, right?
I was just going to ask if you think back to those Twitter days, maybe before you withdrew, how did that attack or that sense of like, you idiot, how could you say you're the world's happy? You're not happy. Stop putting up a. I could just imagine,
Yeah,
right?
you're just
The
pretending, you're fake.
trolls and yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
How did hearing that, reading that affect you during those days?
It really makes you reflect a lot on that goal. Like, is this who I am or who I want to be? It was a growth moment. I had to really, while I set this goal, it's easy to set a goal and then 6 months, a year down the road, maybe you revisit it. Okay, maybe this is really who I don't want to be. But every time I revisited, who do I want to be? This is who I want to be.
Yeah.
And I had to learn how to self-validate more than rely on external validation. Because, so much of life is I get a good grade on a test. My teacher tells me I'm good. Thus, I feel good. Right? I get a promotion at work or a raise. My boss says I'm good. Thus, I feel good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I avoid conflicts on social media. I put forth optimistic things. People say I'm good. I feel good. I couldn't rely on other people saying I'm good anymore. I had to make sure that I was confident with my motivations. And yes, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say things wrong, but I know what my intentions are, and I have to be confident in myself. And that was a new belief I had to adopt.
Yeah, I like that. Erik, I have a statement that I use in different places, and I'm not as direct. It's not the first thing I lead with. I'm considering maybe doing more with this, just seeing your boldness here. I call myself the world's best lifestyle engineer. And lifestyle engineering is the methodology and the system and the beliefs that we bring as an organization in our coaching practice. So what we do with our clients is called lifestyle engineering, and our program is the lifestyle engineering blueprint. And it's this whole idea of, the work you've done, the work we do with our clients of building the career of your dreams and the life of your dreams and being the person you want to be. And we call that process lifestyle engineering. And it said, hey, look, I'm the world's best lifestyle engineer. And the first few times I said that, there was that same kind of backlash from people. Like, what are you talking about? There's so many people who've done more than you in this domain. There's people who have the lifestyle businesses or travel all the time, and you're still attached to your, location all the excuses or reasons or attacks about how that wasn't true came in. And the thing that actually was hardest for me, and this is what I'm curious about in your experience, was being really mindful not to make that claim from a place of ego, but making that statement and that claim from purely a place of intention. It's not about me and no others. If someone else wants to make the same claim, that's fine. There's room at the top for more than one world's best lifestyle engineer. It's not about ranking or measurement. It's about this aspirational identity to live into. But I caught myself falling victim to my own ego at times. Like, oh, I am the world's best life, and kind of puffing my chest up rather than just saying, what would the world's best lifestyle engineer do in this situation? And how would the world's best lifestyle engineer show up to this challenge? And so for you, what's been the journey with being the world's happiest software engineer? How has that played out? Is the ego there? What would you describe?
Yeah, the ego is there at times in the sense that I never put it out there originally with the intent of developing a following or with the intent of having a coaching business. It was purely my own personal goals. But then people start asking me questions of, well, how did you become the world's happiest software engineer? Can you help me? Can you help me? All these questions are popping up, and I then start trying to help. and then quickly realized maybe some things only worked for me. It's not working for others. People are slapping me in the face saying, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," and that's when some of my ego gets hurt and I want to flare up. I like what you said when you're responding to a challenge. You ask, "What would the world's best lifestyle engineer do?" That has been a consistent theme in my journey, and most of my content is written. I don't do a lot of video or audio content, so I find myself mostly in the weeds, Twitter threads, going back and forth, and a potential argument, right?
Okay.
That question of how would the world's happiest software engineer respond
Yeah.
has been very important, because sometimes I can get a little defensive. Sometimes I want to come off a little sarcastic, sometimes demeaning. So having that constant question has been very helpful. And then now you talk about the journey. So that was maybe a year or two ago, as I'm kind of middling around figuring out what I want to do. And now it's in the last year, I've been able to speak at some conferences, podcasts, and it's been amazing to me the amount of need in this space that I didn't even know was there until I put my name out there.
Yeah.
And now all these opportunities are opening up to help and collaborate and build. And there are so many great engineers out there that need help. So I appreciate being able to talk to you, Zach, because I think you and I are aligned on a lot of things.
Oh, for sure. So Erik, before I get into some tactical things that people could take action on and use in their own journey, if you were going to describe the biggest difference between Erik walking out of that therapy session and the Erik who's sitting across from me on Zoom today, what stands out to you the most of what's changed?
My intentionality. As an engineer, it is easy to develop a skill set or get known for a technology just because it's expedient for your current company. They need somebody to maintain an old legacy system. They need somebody to work with this difficult client. And you kind of just follow the waves at work to wherever it pushes me. Yeah, that was old Erik. But now I feel like I have a lot more direction in my career. I'm a lot more intentional with the projects or the work that I say yes to, even at work. Even if my boss asks me to do something, I've said no to promotions because I think that's going to put me in a bad place. And then being vocal at work about what I want to work on. So similar to how me putting that tagline on LinkedIn has created a lot of professional opportunities, being vocal at work about the type of things I enjoy doing has opened up more venues for me to do more of that. So tactically, for example, being asked for space to do more advocacy work, community building. Now, my employer, Yum Brands, has been great at supporting me in my personal goals and allowing me space at work to dedicate time and energy to accomplishing what I'm doing in this conversation, right? This is a work call for me, even though we're talking about topics that maybe aren't necessarily day-to-day at my current work. The more you talk about it, the more opportunities will come.
I love that. And big shout out to Yum Brands for creating that kind of culture where they welcome your advocacy and input and self-guided career building without punishing people for that. I think a lot of engineers are afraid that if I was to say no to a promotion, that's the black spot. No more opportunities for me. If Erik's the kind of person who doesn't want what we give him, so we're not going to give him anymore. Those are real beliefs, and in some cases, sadly, real cultures that exist in corporate America and around the world. So I love that. And what was Yum Brands the role that you transitioned into? When you mentioned earlier that was a decision to make? Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I love that. Maybe we'll come back to how you made that decision in a moment, but I wanted to talk around this idea of becoming happier. And Erik, we've had a lot of amazing leaders on this podcast who speak to that from a philosophical or ideological lens and some of the mindset and heartbeat of this, and really, really powerful conversations. But since we're both engineers, I thought it would be fun to take a more tactical angle to this. Most engineers want to know how, and therefore, what do I do? Less around the being and this more difficult to articulate side, the consciousness around happiness. and they just want to know, like, what should I do differently? How
Yeah.
can I move in the right direction? So what would be Erik's roadmap to happiness if we were going to put, that top on the Pareto distribution of the things that matter most that you've discovered that work for you, for your clients? If somebody simply said, Erik, I want to be happier, where do they begin?
Yeah. So for me, it was, and the term that I use is what gives me energy. And then defining tactically how I can have a system of accountability around that. So, for example, when I was looking for a dream job, I'll just list, I got the document pulled up right here. I'll just read through what some of the things
Nice.
were important for me.
Yeah.
Right. So what would make me happy on a team? Creativity. And I have a scale of 1 to 5, and I've listed 4 different roles that were tangential to my current role. I was looking for, management position, sales engineer, going in-house,
Totally.
tech lead.
All the engineers we're building our CSM in our minds right now.
Yeah, that's right.
We got you.
Which one's going to give me opportunities to be more creative? Which one is going to give me a large enough team size? I was tired of wearing multiple hats. I wanted to share responsibility, and I wanted to have a defined role. So which one's going to help me do that? What sense of ownership do I have? Or am I going to be stuck by, gatekeepers, different stakeholders, different approval gates I have to walk through? Is the group of people I'm going to work with consistent or not? Or am I constantly going to have to be meeting new people? That's an energy drain for me. I want to develop friends at work. What's the time expectation, travel expectation, compensation, emotional safety?
You're taking all the qualities about work that you said, these are the energy adders, the things that give me energy, the things I resonate with. These others are things that drain energy from me. Ranking, prioritizing, and now taking your best assessment for the roles and opportunities you have to give yourself guidance.
Yep. So I identified the role, and then every time I interviewed for a company, it gave me some very targeted questions to ask potential opportunities. Yeah,
absolutely. If we extrapolate that concept, I'm actually curious first, energy and happiness. In this example, the question was like, hey, how do I become happier?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the kind of direction you went first was, well, what gives me energy? So talk to us about how you see that relationship between energy and happiness.
I use the term energy in the sense that something that I could feel a little bit more tangibly. Sometimes happiness depends on the situation, depends on the day. Energy, though, for me was a consistent metric that I can evaluate against. Large group meetings, I am more tired after I walk out of that meeting than I am going in. Okay, I can identify that. Being on call at 2 a.m., that definitely drains my energy. So it just seemed like a more useful metric for my own evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is some commentary, while I think I was raised well, but I feel like in the community I grew up in, as a young man, identifying emotions was not something that was commonly taught, right? The negative
just
emotions.
Don't emote in general.
Don't emote. Yeah, exactly. So being happy, what is happy? I don't even know how to identify when I'm sad versus I'm happy, when I'm angry versus I'm not. So energy was just easier to work with.
This is really important. I want to sit on this for a moment, and I'll share a concept that I coach, and maybe you take this and run with it in your own frame, Erik. But I like the connection, because what is happiness? At some level, happy is an emotion. Like it falls into the category of one of the many emotions that we can experience in life. And, I believe emotion can be thought of as energy in motion, emotion, energy in motion.
Yeah.
And it takes energy to experience an emotion. If you want to be angry, think about like violent anger. It takes a lot of physical energy to get into a very angry state. So if you want to spike the anger meter, that's an energy draining experience for people, right? If you want to spike the meter of happiness, that also takes energy. You're not going to reach a high level of happiness without bringing a high level of energy into that moment, right? And now the energy, we could talk all day about where's the source of that and how's it coming and is it external versus internal and blah, blah, blah. But the point remains, peak happiness is going to happen at the same time in the same moment as some peak energy. It's going to require energy. And I talk about this idea of, high vibe versus low vibe. So kind of people think that way. It's not a perfect metaphor. All models are wrong. Some are useful, right? So happiness might be considered a high vibration emotion, and maybe depression or sadness is a low vibration emotion. But the physicist inside of us, both as engineers, maybe revolts to that concept. But anyway, the point remains, it's an energy thing. So I love your concept of focusing on energy because, for one, it's easier for us to wrap our head around, will this bring energy or steal it? And knowing that if I have the energy, the opportunity for happiness is there. And this is where I want you to pick up and maybe run from your experience or how you coach this. I've also seen, though, that an abundance of energy doesn't equate to happiness. You can do the things that bring you energy and still not be happy.
Yeah.
And so how do you actually bridge the opportunity, because you have the energy, the work is aligned with what you love, but if someone's still not happy, what's missing?
I think there are a lot of inhibitors in normal life. And what I mean by that is you can have different addictions that we use to cope with difficult emotions, can also cap our ability to feel positive emotions. And that was what I had to work through with my therapist as well. Even things like coffee even can affect your ability to process an emotion, because it's stimulating you to such a degree that it removes your ability to feel the primary emotions that your body's trying to fire off. Social media, right? That quick dopamine hit prevents you from feeling higher spikes of happiness. Or for me, I still play, but video games even, right? You get that constant feeling of dopamine for beating a level or whatever. Was, for me, I felt robbing me for feeling higher peaks of joy when engaging with more long-term goals. So my life was filled with kind of short-term pleasure-seeking behavior. And then once I was able to address my social media consumptions, some negative addictions that I have, that gave me a more accurate baseline and allowed me to actually feel greater amounts of joy. At the same time, greater amounts of negativity. And I had to develop other coping mechanisms. And I realized a lot of my behaviors were less about finding more joy and more about mitigating the pain. Yeah, did any of that make sense?
No, I love that. It does. It absolutely does. And there's two things I'll highlight from what you said that I think are important. One is the time horizon. Getting out of moment to moment, short term, social media is a perfect example, these micro doses, this incredible pace of stimulation, but it's all very short term and it's not connected to these deeper purpose and meaning focused objectives of our life, our calling, the things that really matter in the long run. The other thing that you said that I thought was interesting is this idea of the range, the emotional range that we experience, the consequence of numbing, whether that's through behaviors, maybe extreme examples like alcohol or whatever, but at any level, when we fall into that, like keeping it in a narrow band of emotional experience, you have to recognize you're limiting how much joy and happiness you can experience. But a lot of times people do that subconsciously because of the fear of those deep negatives, to your point. The numbing of pain also numbs pleasure. And when you open that cap, you don't have the luxury of only opening one side. If you want to experience more joy, more happiness, it's very likely that you're also going to experience a deeper, darker level of some of the negative emotions. And being prepared to work through that and process that. And I even say, Erik, just a willingness to accept that it's likely, it's normal, and it's safe. I tell my clients, like, it's okay to be really sad. That's not a bad thing. It's safe to feel a negative emotion. That's normal. We need to learn how to process that, just like we need to learn how to experience more happiness. So I think those are both super important points to take away from what you just said. Go ahead.
I was going to say the big takeaway for me that I've been learning is that emotions are not moral. Like, it's not bad to feel sad. it's not even bad to feel angry. Now, if we act on that, hurt somebody else, say something we don't mean to say, okay, yes, it's bad. You're hurting other people, but really, it's just our body's way of communicating with ourselves. Just like I
Yes.
would say, it's not bad to feel hungry. It's not bad to feel tired. Our body's telling us we need sleep. Our body's telling us we need food. Similarly, when I feel sad or angry, just take a step back, process the emotion. What is my body trying to tell me? Oh, I need some human connection. I need to, for me, I felt very isolated with remote work. So usually my response is
Sure.
I need to talk to a friend. I need to talk to my wife. I need to let somebody know how I'm feeling. But yeah, emotions are not moral,
That's good.
right? They're
That's
not
good.
bad.
Emotions are not good or bad. They're just emotions.
Yeah,
What you do with them could branch into a moral conversation. So, all
exactly.
right, let me come back to my engineer to engineer. If there was one more tactical, actionable thing that you do that reliably says, hey, this helps people move up that happiness scale, what would be one more that Coach Erik would give us today?
Yeah. So as software engineers, we spend so much time around developing methodologies, processes to improve the systems that we develop, right? We need to take that same level of rigor for ourselves. And there's overlap. So for example, you have a 2-week sprint that culminates in a retrospective and begins with a planning session. I would suggest at a similar frequency, you do the same for yourself,
Yes.
right? What are your goals over the next short-term time horizon? And how are you doing on accomplishing them? Adopting the principles for how you develop your software and applying them to your personal life. We've talked about merging work life. The people I work with have had incredible success at just doing just that.
I think that's brilliant. We call that the playbook at Awaco, this rhythm of
Mhm.
action. Whether you're in agile or any methodology, it's like, yes, we do this and we're great at it at work. Let's apply it into these other domains. So I think that's
Mhm.
brilliant. And it's very easy to do. And yet it's the discipline, the consistency, the accountability to
Yeah.
simply follow through and do it that separates those really happy, successful leaders from the average. So Erik, tell us then a little bit about what you're doing as a coach. So I know you're crushing it at Yum Brands. You're doing the work of an engineer by day,
Thank you.
but you've also built this really beautiful following and brand around helping folks who want to break into tech, new programmers who don't know their way. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and your vision for the side hustle and the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So while I do coach developers and how to find more fulfillment at work, the primary thing that I do in my free time is helping new developers find their first job in tech. It was difficult for me. It was difficult for a lot of people in my network coming out of school. So I just want to pay it forward. A big part of my happiness and joy is feeling like my work has meaning.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a professional context, that meaning gets lost, but being able to have this outlet where I know there's a tangible output, somebody has employment, somebody has a job. That's where I find energy there. So if you're in the Dallas area, I'm a co-organizer for the Dallas Software Developers Group. We
Awesome.
meet once or twice a month. So find us on meetup.com. We can chat there or connect with me on LinkedIn. I've been more than happy to help support somebody who's looking for a job there too.
Brilliant. And Erik, send me the links to the meetup and everything. We'll put that in the show notes so happy engineers can find you easily. Tell me your perspective, helping these young devs with what the environment is like right now. So at the time of this recording, February 22nd, 2023, I haven't kept my tally up, but we're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of announcements in terms of layoffs, especially in big tech. There's folks out there who have experience who are looking for jobs, and anybody who was right at the cusp of their first role is struggling. I actually just talked to an amazing gentleman, 20 years in the Navy, a fantastic leader who came out, went through school, got his master's, wanted to get into tech, has a very different background than a lot of folks, had a
Mm-hmm.
role at Amazon, but less than a year in, and he got cut just recently. And sort of last in, first out challenge. It wasn't anything he did or his performance. He just didn't have that experience. I know there's a lot of people in those types of situations. What is your, sort of thought about the environment, and what does it change, if anything, about what a developer needs to be doing right now to find a role if they're looking for one?
despite the big layoffs announced in 2023, you mentioned, tens of thousands from the big tech companies, developers' unemployment rate is still about 1.5%.
Wow.
Which is less than the national average right now.
Yeah, by far.
By far, which indicates that there is still a high demand for software engineers. And most engineers that were let go were quickly absorbed within a few months. Or most of the people that were let go at these big tech companies were non-tech people, sales, marketing, etc. So first, I would just say there's a lot of demand for who you are and what you do. Depends on your years of experience, depends on your prior work history, etc. But not give up hope.
Yeah.
If anything, like ChatGPT or the growth of digital systems or remote work during the pandemic has shown us, is that more and more jobs and roles are going to be automated, which means there are going to be more and more people that need to support them, which means at least in the near future, there's going to be more and more need for developers.
Okay. That's an encouraging word. Everything I've seen, Erik, aligns with that. I agree. I think sometimes the news and the hype, they're just trying to create a story through fear, so we'll read it. And if you broaden out and look at the whole scope of the industry and the demand creation, there's going to be some individual, really hard situations. My heart is absolutely touched for somebody who has to go through being laid off, the impact to your family, the stress of that process. So individually on a micro scale, it's a really big deal. But at the macro level, when you just look at the industry overall, probably not as big a deal as the news wants us to think it is. Erik, I appreciate what you're doing, and we'll make sure anybody out there who's listening and is in tech and needs support, especially if you're in Dallas, click the links in the show notes and go chat with Erik. Erik, this has been awesome. I wish we could go all day. I know there's so many more fun things around your own story, happiness in engineering, and how we can live that more and more. One of the things I believe is that great coaching, the work you do, and great engineering, the work you also do, has in common: questions lead, the answers follow. And if we want to be happier, find more success, get better answers, then we need to ask better questions. So what would be the question that you would lead us with today?
I think that the foundational question is asking yourself, why am I an engineer? Or why do I want to be an engineer? And you can dive deeper into that with some sub-questions as you answer it yourself. But I think what you'll find is that people will fall into different camps, right? They like to build things. They love the community. And I think as you understand your why for who you are and what you do, you'll have a better understanding for what you need to find a way to do more of, as that's your energy giver.
Why am I an engineer? What keeps me here? What makes me want to be one? Erik, I love that so much. Thanks again for your generosity today, making time for this. And give a thank you to the leadership at Yum Brands for giving you the space to come and be with us today. And I just want to acknowledge you for having the courage to step up and make that declaration into the world that you are, in fact, the world's happiest software engineer.
Thank you.
That aspirational identity, living into it. And I know you and I aren't perfect in our world's best statements, and that wasn't ever the point, right? Just to keep moving towards that North Star. And I know it's inspired me and the happy engineer listening, and tens of thousands, who knows, maybe we're in the hundreds or millions of people who've seen and been touched by that. So I appreciate you, and thanks for being here today. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.